everyone, so today I'm starting a new series of how to draw portraits in different mediums. Today's medium is pencil or graphite. Another quick little thing I wanted to add is that I will need multiple portraits, and yes, if nobody sends in portraits, I can just use my friends' pictures or whatever. But if you're interested in me using a portrait of yours, you can DM me one through Instagram. Just know that, you know, your face will be exposed on this channel on camera, so just make sure you're comfortable with that. Another thing too is when you send that picture, you could also send a request for the medium you want me to use if it's a medium I haven't already done. The other thing I wanted to add is if you do submit pictures, please make sure it's high quality pictures. If it's really blurry, I can't really do the tutorial as in-depth as I would like it, so please make sure it's high quality photos, and if it's not selfies, that's better just because the angle is a little better to work with, but there are some selfies I can work with, so just send me a picture and we can see if it's one I can work with. And the last little bit of information is if you want to request a medium just because you want me to get to it sooner than later, just leave it in the comments and I'll try to get to it. If you are already familiar with graphite tools, you can just skip to the time on the screen and it'll go straight to the tutorial. Okay, so first let's talk about pencils. I know a lot of people think they have to go in and buy a really expensive pencil kit with a bunch of different degrees of leads, but that's not the truth. Here I have a 6 range of different leads, and as you can tell, I've used it quite a bit. And this is the case that I use most often, and a lot of the time for pictures, I only use a 4B or an 8B, or I mean both of them in conjunction. Let's see. So you can just get off by just using, you know, a standard school pencil, or if you want to get fancy and you can only afford one pencil, I recommend a 4B. A traditional pencil is 2B, and I'll get into what those different letters and numbers mean. The last option that I know of is a pencil crayon, a graphite crayon, which these can be useful for large, covering large areas at a time. So I couldn't find exactly what H and B stand for, but I've always traditionally thought of it as H means hard and B means bold or black. So here, let me show you an example. So the lowest one I have in this set is HB, which is going to be a harder pencil and it's going to draw lighter. So you can almost hear the scratchiness of it. This is good for detail and maybe small things like hair and eyelashes, and it's also not going to smear as easily. I mean, it did smear, but not as easily as, let's say, an 8B. So here's an 8B, which is one of the darkest ones. I'm trying to press at the same consistency, but here you can see it smears a lot easier. Traditionally it's supposed to smear a lot easier. I will just use a 4B and maybe even an 8B if I want to get crazy. And if I am doing a very I guess professional graphite drawing, I will use the different ranges. So here is the 4B, and I like my portraits usually darker, and you know, you can make this softer if you really want. And again, here's the 8B. And like I said, you can even get away with using a nice school pencil. And there is even the option of using a mechanical pencil. Here's one of my favorite mechanical pencils. It's called the Graph Gear 500 by Pentel. And here's just a regular school one, and it's kind of dirty. But honestly, you could use these if mechanical pencil is your preferred medium, and you can shade. But I like a traditional pencil better just because I can really get some nice shading in, whereas if I try to do that with a mechanical pencil, it might take a little longer. It's definitely achievable, and maybe even want to have a combination of the two. And here, real quick, just for demonstrative purposes, I was going to try the graphite crayon. I don't have much experience with them, but I know they are a useful tool. This graphite crayon is 2B, which is the standard pencil degree. And like I said, you can cover a nice amount of area in the same time, and it should just act like traditional graphite. So it doesn't really act any different. I know a lot of people would think it would act more crayon-like or waxy, but that's not the case. So the next category I have for you guys is erasers, and I've kind of clumped them into a few different sections. So the first two are mechanical erasers. These are refillable, and you can get them at most art stores, and they're really nice for small detail or larger detail depending on what kind of one you get. The next one is this eraser pencil, and it's by Faber-Castell. You can find this at Michael's, and it just sharpens like a typical pencil, and this used to be one of my favorite art tools, but I have not used it in a while, but it is a nice tool to have. The next tool is just a standard eraser, but this is my all-time favorite eraser. It is a Staedtler Mars plastic, and you can find this at most art stores, craft stores. And it's really good for erasing big areas or even some smaller ones if you still have the corners. And this is actually my eraser right now, but I just chose to put the prettier one in. The next eraser is this kneaded eraser, and I'm sure you guys are all familiar with this, but if you're not, if your kneaded eraser is dirty, you can obviously just keep ripping it apart until it gets clean. And this is good for smaller areas or bigger areas. Some people really love these, some people don't use them at all. I used to really use it a lot when I was started off with art, and now I haven't really as much, but I have for some charcoal drawings. Really quickly, I just wanted to show you how some of these erased. So this is my Tombow Mono Zero.
And I'm going to be erasing the HB, erases pretty good, 2B, and 6B.
And then for the last one, I'll probably use this Staedtler Mars plastic.
So erases really well.
And all of these erasers I'm recommending erase really well. I wouldn't recommend any that I don't like, so those are just some of my favorites. This first category are called blending stumps, and you can unwrap them to make them cleaner. I just haven't. I use my supplies, that's why they're a little dirty. The second one is a tortillon, and the difference between these two is a blending stump has two sides and a tortillon just has one side. The next one is a chamois cloth, or chamois, I believe I'm saying that right, but if I'm not, I'm sorry. But this is just a cloth you can use to blend, and traditionally you don't want to use your hands unless they're very clean, otherwise you'll leave oils on the paper and that can make the paper disintegrate.
Okay, so here is a blending stump or a tortillon, and you can also use a smaller one. I even use this for eyelashes. And this is the chamois cloth.
So my next category is paper, and this is the paper that I use. It's Strathmore Bristle Vellum Surface. So when looking at bristle, you'll often notice that there's also a smooth surface bristle. I recommend the vellum surface just because it'll work better for your graphite. Some brands even sell a bristle with two different sides, so maybe you want to try buying this kind of paper if you aren't sure if graphite is your preferred medium. My last and final section is just some extra tools that you don't necessarily have to have but are helpful. So this is just a pencil charcoal, and this is for really, really dark spots if you're trying to achieve a very dark look. And the second is a pencil extender, which just makes a small pencil longer. The last and final tool I have is a workable fixative. If your graphite drawing is just being a mess and it's getting everywhere all over your hands, you may want to pick up a workable fixative. A workable fixative just means that once you spray it, you'll still be able to work on your project. With some fixatives, it's kind of the final layer and you wouldn't really be able to work over it. So just make sure if you want something like this that it is a workable fixative. It makes a big difference. The final factor I want you to consider is your reference. So what are you basing your portrait off? When I was first starting off with art and trying to draw humans, I would just take pictures straight from magazines and draw those, but you have to be careful with that because of copyright and everything like that. So if you do something like that and you post on social media, I don't know the exact rules, but I would say, like I said, I'm no expert, I would say maybe just make sure that you wrote in your description that you took the photograph from this magazine, blah blah. Even try to find the photographer if possible. If it's a photo you have, you can use your iPhone or smartphone. You can even print out the picture and just reference that. The iPad is my favorite reference to use because I can zoom up and do a lot of different editing and stuff that would help my final product look a lot better. This is just a photograph of my best friend Austin. I'll put his Instagram right here. He's very cute and feminine and posts a lot of really fun pictures, so if you want to go follow him, do that. So some artists use a system called gridding where they would put grids on their original photo and then similar grids on their piece of paper, and you would make sure the proportions of the dimensions are exact, otherwise the gridding would not work at all. I personally don't use gridding just because I don't really have to, so this tutorial is especially how to do portraits without gridding. And one final thing to keep in mind, I kind of mentioned, but traditionally I like to cut a piece of paper that is like the exact dimensions, length, and width of the piece of paper I'm using, so you can edit your photo on Photoshop or you can even just eyeball it, and sometimes I just eyeball it. For this tutorial I will eyeball it just because it takes a minute to do all the sizing and such. Since this tutorial is only how to do portraiture and not backgrounds, today I'm not really going to focus on the background or clothing, so I am just going to zoom up on Austin's face and pretty much only do that part. So in order to resize your paper, you're going to have to cut it. I would never recommend just taking your scissors straight and cutting it because we're humans and we're not perfect. So you can either use a straight edge, pencil it in, then cut it with scissors, or you can use a X-Acto blade and cut it like that. Or if you even have a paper trimmer, you can use that. Unfortunately, this piece of paper is too large and it won't fit in this. So here I am just measuring 7 inches and then doing multiple different marks and then connecting, kind of like connecting the dots. Then I'm gonna just take my cutting mat, my piece of paper, a X-Acto blade, and a ruler that's not going to get cut up with the X-Acto blade. If you haven't done this before, or especially if you are younger, please get a parent to help you. I've cut myself pretty bad on this thing before. Now you can just use your piece of paper straight like this, but I like to tape off the edges and tape it to a surface that I can move. You don't want to tape it to the table because if you want to slant it, you won't really be able to do that. The reason I tape off the edges is just because it's really satisfying to peel off that tape and have those clean white edges, and I think it looks better overall. So I just take something like masking tape and tape off the edges. Traditionally, you'll want the bottom side to have the longest or the largest part taped off because that's traditionally where artists will put their signature at. I also like to have my surface propped up a little bit, so I'm just putting a cup and setting this on top of it. And I have my iPad off to the right of me, so I'm just looking at the reference right here. Okay, so the first thing I start off with is sketching the head shape. All your initial marks you're going to want to make very light and very gesturally. Gesturally just means they're not very hard and concrete, it's just a general overall idea. So like I said, very gesturally, and just to get the shape of it. Another thing I get a feel for is how much space is in between the jaw and the edge of the photo, how much space is in between the cheek and the chin and the bottom, and the forehead and the top. If you look at things in proportion to different proportions, it'll help a lot. Then once you kind of got an idea, you kind of start fleshing it out. And by fleshing it out, I just mean make the lines a bit more specific. Here I am cleaning up my edges and just making the picture look less confusing to me. Another tip I have is to look at the face shape overall. Look at this face shape and then look at your reference face shape. Is this face shape too tall? Is it too wide? So on and so forth. So just compare it to just the face shape, just whatever you're working on, not everything at once. I know a lot of people get overwhelmed, so it's a lot easier to just look at one specific thing at a time. Once you've got the basic face shape, I kind of like to do a lateral longitude type lines. I don't know if that's the right word exactly, but basically where is the central axis of the face? If he was facing the camera straight on, it would be straight in the middle, but since his face is ever so tilted, it's going to be off to the left a bit. So this line is kind of saying where's the middle of the lips, where's the middle of the nose. Then maybe I will go in and do the eyes. If a person is looking down, this will be slightly tilted. If the person is looking up, it'll be slightly tilted up like that. So his eyes are pretty straight, maybe a slightly tilted downward. And then I'm gonna go in and kind of do the same thing with the nose. maybe I'll just put kind of a circle where the nose is, and maybe kind of a gestural circle of where the lips would be. My art teacher always says you want to make your mistakes fast rather than slowly and progressively, because if I went in and did the detail of the eye and it was wrong, I'd have to completely erase it, and a lot of the times we commit to things and we don't want to change them when we've put so much time in them. So make your mistakes quick. And I'm kind of just putting little marks where everything starts and ends. One of my favorite tips when I'm drawing is to, right off the bat, make sure that you are capturing the sense of the person. I don't think the sense is the right word, but basically, you know, the most important thing to me when I'm doing a portrait is to make it look like that person. So if it's not looking like that person right away, go ahead and fix a few things, because you want it to look like the person. And a lot of the times it's not going to look like the person right away, so give it a moment and see how it's developing. So again, I am just keep going in and adding, kind of defining everything. Again, when I'm doing this little part of the nose, I'm looking how far away is maybe the corner of the eye to the nose. So you're looking at everything in relation to another thing. That really helps a lot. So obviously not everyone's going to be good at this part right away. I've been doing this for a long time, so I am pretty familiar with it, but if you're just starting out, don't feel bad if this part is hard and it takes a while. It used to always take me a very long time. I would argue that this part is the most important part to any kind of drawing you're doing of someone, because this kind of makes or breaks the whole drawing afterwards. Because if you don't get the characteristics of the person right away, it's not going to look like them when you continue to add more detail. And I think, like I said, the most important part of this section of the drawing is to draw everything gesturally at first. You're not going to go in and do this eye that's detailed right away. It's not going to look right. Okay, when I look at this picture straight on, and I put the pencil where the edge of the nose is, it lines up with about the center of the pupil. So those are some little tricks you can do. And so right now I'm pretty much completely erasing the nose. Sometimes you have to do that if it's not looking exactly how it should. Okay, so I'm going to keep going ahead and trying to capture the likeness of him, and I'll probably just speed this up. Sometimes if the person has darker eyes, if you color in their eyes, it helps to get the likeness, to see if it looks like them so far. I still have a lot to fix, but it's getting there. And like I said, sometimes you just have to completely get rid of things and fix them. So in this case, the nose was just not right. So before I commit too far, I'm just erasing it and gonna retry. Okay, so once you think you have a pretty good outline, you're gonna go in and with your pencil kind of shade the areas that are dark. If you can't really figure out which areas are darker, squint your eyes and it'll help you a little if you're squinting your eyes. So right now I'm kind of doing the same thing with the hair as I did with the face. I'm kind of like mapping in gesturally how it looks. You can do the hair at any point. You can do it when you decide to do the face as well, but I just got more in depth with the face, and now I'm deciding to go in and add the hair. And it's the same exact idea with the gesturally drawing the ear and getting a feel for it, and then once you get a feel for it, you go in and add some details. So right now I'm just going to go in with my tortillon and really further darken up those areas by somewhat shading, making that shading a bit darker. So I already have some graphite on this blending stump, so it helps to bring in some of that darkness, but if you don't, you can just get a separate piece of paper, put it to the side, put some graphite on it, and pick it up with this. So I think at this point I have got the likeness of him. Obviously there's going to be some things that are always off. I've done this picture of Austin before with a watercolor, and I never finished this one, but again with this one I think it really looks like him, but there's still some things that don't exactly capture the likeness, aren't exactly like them, and you know, that's okay. We're not machines, we're artists. So again, I'm just continuing to darken up the really dark spots. Another tip I have is if you are having trouble capturing the likeness, or you're not sure if it looks like this person, you could ask someone that also knows this person pretty well, and you know, just ask them if they think it looks like this person. And I know it's hard, especially as like a beginning artist, to take criticism, but in the long run it'll help you be a better artist. Another thing too I want to address is if you're drawing a picture of someone, you know, it can still look like the person even if it doesn't look exactly like the picture. I think a lot of artists have done art like that, where not every hair is correct and maybe the eye's at a different angle or something like that, but if you showed this picture to anyone that knows that person, they would still know who it is, you know. So with the tip of asking someone if it looks like this person, even if parts of it are off, some people will know exactly who it is. So just take that into consideration if you're getting really frustrated and it doesn't look just like the photo, or even if you're at this part of the drawing and you realize, oh, the eyes are at the right angle, you know, it can still look like that person. So and also if you've already gotten so far into a drawing, you might as well finish it, because you know, it's good practice, and of course there's some drawings that it's just like it's not worth it to continue pursuing it. Of course there are drawings like that, but for the most part you should try to, like, definitely throughout this drawing there's parts where it's like, oh, should I just start over? You know, so you might get those doubts and they might be valid, but other times it might just be because you've been staring at this for so long and everything. So definitely get other people's opinions into consideration. Like, I just asked Tim and what he thought about this, and he knows Austin really well, and he said it looks like him, definitely. So I was like, okay, I'll take that. So yeah. Okay, so a kneaded eraser like this one's really good for something like this. So in this whole area I made this generally too darker, so if I just kind of dab over that area, it kind of softens it up nicely. So now I'm really going in with like nitty-gritty details. So like, for example, right here under the eye there are 3 lines. So like there's this line, 1, 2, 3. So with stuff like that, there are some things that I will count exactly how many there is and try to get it, but with like things like hair, you can't really try to do every strand except for if it's important to the composition of the picture. Like, for example, this one hair right there kind of frames how the eyebrow appears. So stuff like that you will want to take into consideration, but like for a lot of it you can't do every single thing as it is. I mean, you can, but you might go insane, so I normally don't do that. And so pretty much what I'm doing is slowly building up detail while adding darkness to certain parts. I kind of trade on and off. And so I've actually used this 4B pencil the whole time, and maybe I'll trade over to an 8B or some charcoal at the end, but right now I'm just fine using this. The other thing is, if people have certain beauty marks that are really important to their facial, like their overall look, make sure you get those in the right space and make sure you include them. Like Austin has this one right here and this one right there, and those are pretty crucial, I would say, to his appearance. So you always want to make sure you include any beauty marks that are obvious. For the freckles on his nose, those aren't as important because they're kind of all over, and they're, unless there's like a certain dark one in a particular area. Don't forget the eye has shading too. The eyes aren't just plain white. There is some shading in the corners and such. So at this point I am somewhat wrapping things up. I might go a little more in detail with the hair, but overall the face has some nice detail to it, and I'm probably going with the ear and probably darken some places up and add a bit more detail. But it's getting to that stage where it's almost done, kind of. Okay, so obviously I did not focus really on the clothes or too much on the hair, just enough to give you an idea. So now I'm going to take off this tape, and I will actually probably cut it another inch or so right here, just so that it's not so off-centered. Okay, so the last and final thing to do is sign it, and then put the date. And you may want to consider spraying it or something like that. But yeah, if you've made it this far, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and like I said, please comment you know, what medium you want me to try next, or even any requests for videos. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more of these, and comment your thoughts. Alright, thanks again for watching. Bye guys.